Hello, everyone. Welcome to our community update for May 18th. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to jump right into a couple of statistics about our community. We now have a total of 68 open source developers on GitHub and 949 GitHub stars. In the last 2 weeks, we have added 61 new community members to our Slack and 46 new community members that are spread across some of our other platforms. This includes Twitter, our meetup group, and potentially some GitHub followers as well. So welcome to all of our new and returning members. We are very happy to have you join Open Metadata. I wanted to take a moment to announce our new community office hours. These will happen every week on Zoom. And the Zoom links are actually pinned in our general and announcement channels on Slack. So if you would like to join up to our Slack and you'll be able to grab the Zoom links from there. These are great opportunities to join if you had any questions, if you ran into any issues, or you want to talk about, say, the roadmap, or simply just pop in to say hello to the team. They are all happening at 11 a.m. and we've separated them over 2 different time zones. So Wednesdays and Fridays are geared to the North American time zones, and they happen at 11 a.m. PDT, that's Pacific Daylight Time. Tuesday and Thursday are geared toward Indian and Asian time zones, and they're happening at 11 a.m. IST, India Standard Time. So our minor release of 10.1 is being released today. Yay! So along with the 3 updates that we actually announced in our previous week, oh, sorry, just going to admit one more person. 3 updates from our previous week, which included our Postgres support, a variety of UI improvements, and JWT tokens. We also have an ingestion improvement that supports dashboards and messaging services. Now for, there we go. Now for our upcoming major release of 11.0, last week we highlighted 6 features that we planned to add to this release. And actually this week I have one more for you. So just to remind you, or in case you didn't see or weren't able to attend our community meeting last week, we are adding custom attributes to entities, column level lineage, data quality tests, API, and some UI improvements. We're also adding in some data collaboration, specifically around tasks, announcements, and emojis. We have improved policy authoring and roles, as well as global settings for open metadata to configure to Elasticsearch, Airflow, and etc. Now, the 7th new planned feature is authentication. This is authentication for AWS's SSO and Google's SAML. And of course, I have added the GitHub issue numbers here so for all of our planned features so that you can track their progress if one in particular sounds interesting to you. So the majority of our update today is actually going to be from Suresh. He's going to do an intro to metadata modeling. Suresh, you want to share your screen, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I will stop sharing for a moment and let you take over.
Yeah, you need to enable screen sharing.
Oh, I'm apologies. Here you are. Sorry about that. I got to figure out how to set it up so that it does that automatically.
All right, guys. Open metadata main goal is to build open standard for metadata. One of the features that is frequently being asked is ability to extend the metadata that is stored in open metadata, right? So now, even before going into schema extension, let's just go back and look at what we do in open metadata, how we are different, what choices have we made in terms of modeling the metadata, and then how it affects our ability to extend it or not extend it, right? What is harder? What are the challenges? Now, if you look at open metadata, the first thing that we do is, we always say we are schema first. Now, what does schema first metadata modeling mean? Right. So unlike many other systems where metadata models are exposed, right? First, metadata system is implemented, and then whatever is the internal metadata model that is exposed as the metadata models in APIs and how you consume the metadata. Now, versus that, what we do is we always start with schemas, right, for metadata. Now, in our metadata modeling, there are three main concepts. One is types, right? These are reusable building blocks for metadata, right? And it becomes a part of metadata vocabulary. I'll explain how this looks. And then these types are used to build some special types called entities, right? Entities are something that represents a real life or a conceptual object that has an identity, has an existence, and it is built using the types that we have as a fundamental block, right? And then entities have relationship with each other, all kinds of different relationships. So let's look at some of these examples, right? So the types that we have are like email, date, time, duration, schedules, entity, lineage, relationship, naming, different kinds of fields like SQL query fields and markdown. All of these things are strongly typed. In that way, open metadata is different. We just don't use strings. We try to use as much as possible strongly typed building blocks with their own semantics, right? So I'll show you what kind of semantics we do in our metadata modeling. Now, on top of these types, we build this metadata entities, right? And this is where I was talking about entities such as service entities. And this is where you set up a service and then do one-click ingestion. Each of these services host different kinds of data assets, right? So you have database service that has database and tables and database schema, things like that. Now, the other thing that we also do differently is all this metadata is connected as a metadata graph. As an example, you have a database service here. This database service contains database and database contains table. Table is used by, say, metrics. Metrics is a part of dashboard, and then dashboard may be built by a pipeline, and the pipeline might be consuming a topic, Kafka topic, right? So this is how we connect the entities. We build the entities using the types that we have defined, forming core vocabulary for metadata. And then these entities are connected with each other through relationships in a metadata graph. And one key decision that we made based on our past experience, this is a third iteration of a metadata system that we are building. In the past, we went very heavy on metadata systems where we provided APIs to model the metadata, but then we did not provide all the entities and types that are required for building the metadata, leaving most of the work to users to model their own metadata, right? And the problem with that is, if you don't have comprehensive core set of metadata with strong types already available, every organization's metadata looks different, right? So in organization one, an entity is modeled differently because we left the exercise of modeling to the users. And then in an organization two, there is similar entity, but then it is completely modeled differently. This makes metadata not shareable, because of which tools have to actually be repurposed or reintegrated in every organization. The second problem with this is this runs against our core principle of standardizing metadata. Standardizing metadata means have all these entities, all their properties clearly defined, make it available through APIs so that everybody knows this metadata is always going to exist. This is how it is defined. This is what it means. This is how I consume it. So building open standard for metadata requires strongly modeled, already available entities to capture the diverse metadata that exists. Okay. So that's principle number one that we have followed. And then the second thing that we have done is we chose JSON schema for modeling the metadata as a foundation. JSON schema has the rich vocabulary to model, right? Both the structure and semantics of the metadata that we are modeling. It's easy to consume, easy to understand schema definition language compared to many other languages with a lot of features and excellent tool support, right? So now one of the things that we do is when we go with schema first approach, first we define JSON schemas, right? For the metadata types, and from those types, we define entities such as tables, database schema, all the entities that you saw in that metadata graph. Now, once we define JSON schema, the beauty of JSON schema is we generate everything else, the Java code for our backend REST API and metadata store. a Python code for our ingestion framework using Pydantic, TypeScript for our front end, the JavaScript is generated directly from JSON schema. And then the database data that we store in the backend, the metadata that we store, is also compliant with the JSON schema. And then finally, all our documentation, APIs, everything is generated from JSON schema models. So the advantage of this is metadata is consistent across storage, APIs, injection, UI, and docs, right? Whenever we change the metadata, all of these things are automatically updated, and any problems in metadata becomes a runtime problem instead of in many systems, compile time problems. Instead of in many systems, it becomes a runtime problem, right? You make an API call and suddenly you get an error saying, expected field was not, provided, or expected field is not compliant with the definition. None of those things happen, right? So the other problem with, not going schema first is a lot of manual work, right? On the API side, you build validation. On the client side, you build validation, and then you have to go and write the documentation for APIs, providing constraints and semantic expectation, from the client on what the shape of the data that client is sending over APIs. All of this is automated for us, right? And that is the reason why we are strongly consistent with the schema, with our schema first approach. Let's quickly take a look at how we model an entity in JSON schema. Okay, so here is an entity user, right? And this user entity can have its own types in that namespace of user, right? And for that type, you can actually define all the constraints, right? JSON schema has rich way of expressing the structure, and then JSON itself provides many types like integer, numbers, string, objects, arrays, and things like that. And for each of those types, there are different constraints that you can apply. For example, here, string type has min length, max length. You can have regex, you can have formats, whether it is date, time, things like that. That is not only structural validation, it also provides semantic validation that URI is complying with URI, date time is complying with date time. So that's part one, right? So we use the power of JSON schema to describe both the structural and semantic validation that is required, right? The second thing is type system. We have used JSON types that we have developed using JSON objects, and these types are reusable, right? And so ID is a strongly typed JSON type called UUID that is used consistently across all the entities. Email is a type with regex pattern, and all the validation happens so that you don't get a wrong email input. All of these things become types that are available within our open metadata system as a building block, and these are reused across all the entities when we build the entities. We can also do a few things, right? JSON schema allows additional properties. If you set it to false, people cannot just send random key value pairs in the entity data. That is required, because if somebody is sending some data that is unexpected, that we are not, we are silently ignoring, that causes some data to be dropped. So additional properties setting to false means that there's strongly typed only these properties are expected for this entity, right? And then finally, you can also define what is required, optional. All of this provide structural semantic validation and strongly typing the metadata, right? This is done versus few of the other systems. For example, a system we built in the past, we ended up building our own vocabulary system, right? So we built a enum type, which is already available in JSON. We built constraints in our own modeling language, which is already available in JSON. We tried to define many types by ourselves, which was already available. So don't reinvent the wheel, right? Use JSON schema's power for building vocabulary, metadata vocabulary. The second thing that we have done is we chose JSON schema versus many other proprietary schema languages that other systems have used, because JSON schema is one, well understood. It has a great thriving community and a huge tool support, right? So we have ended up using JSON schema as the basis of metadata vocabulary. And this provides, both structural and semantic validation in one place, right? And then across all the different subsystems in a consistent manner. Now, one of the frequent features that we get asked is, hey, you have all this, well-designed open standard for metadata, but I want to add one field, and how can I do that, right? So the goal of the work that we are doing right now is to allow, extending the metadata in open metadata. Now, one word of caution: open standard for metadata means the shape, the kinds of entities that are available, and the core properties of those entities should be standardized so that all tools can expect that they exist and they can actually provide a lot richer functionality, integrate with open metadata, and share the open metadata. So I would say extending the metadata should be used sparingly. Whenever you want to add a new property or a field to an entity, do propose that in the open source. If it is something that is not proprietary and that is something that is useful for everybody, we will just add it in open metadata itself. That way it becomes part of the core standardized properties of an entity. But if something is super proprietary and you want to extend it, that is not common for the use case, is not common for everybody, you should be able to add new properties to the entities and extend the metadata. No changes to the core attributes or core fields are available for can be made for when extending the metadata. You can only add new fields. Okay. The second thing that we want to do is, just like I was talking about all this structural and semantic validation that is available as part of JSON schema, we would like all of that to be available for additional properties that you're adding to an entity, right? That means any field that you're adding to an entity, to extend it, it should be strongly typed, clear semantics, formats, regex, all of those constraints you can describe in JSON should be available here also. We don't want to go into many systems take this approach of just making it a key value pair. There's a key name and then a value is a JSON data. You just set key value pairs. That is how you extend the metadata. We would like to avoid that, and we would like extended metadata itself to be strongly typed, right? And avoid key value pairs. The third thing when we are extending the metadata is, we have actually a rich set of types that we have already defined that you should be able to use for defining the fields that you want to add, right? So we expose all the types that are available in open metadata so that you can use them to define new fields in an entity to extend it. We also want to allow defining new types with their own constraints and both structural and semantic. That is also available in this as part of this feature. And then any new type you're defining within your organization should be reusable, right? So that way your type system is not bloating with too many types that don't make sense. Instead, you are actually methodically building new types into the open metadata, right? So we are introducing new type system APIs. You should be able to define new types, update the type that is existing, and then add a custom field into an entity, right? So that is what these APIs allow. Here is the basic structure of a type, right? There are two kinds of types, field types and entity types. Like I was describing earlier, entity types are, they represent an object with an ID, and fields are used for building the entity, right? As the properties of an entity are defined using fields. Now, if you look at a field, every field, a type is an entity that has unique ID, name. You can have namespaces so that you can group different kinds of types. We have a namespace called basic, where all our basic open metadata types are available. You can also have types within table, right? Table has a type called column, or a table constraint, and things like that. So all these types can be grouped in namespaces, okay? And then finally, every type, when it is defined, must also have a JSON schema corresponding to it. This will be used for validating the value corresponding to a type. Just like we validate all the things that are defined in our regular entities, even for custom fields, you have a corresponding schema, and then that schema will be used for validating min length, max length, format, regex, all the things that are available as powerful constructs in JSON will be available for the types that you're adding and the fields that you're extending the entities with. Okay. So now, so this is where you have all these types. You have email type, maybe you have your own custom types. All of those types are defined. Now you can add the type to an entity saying, I want to extend the entity to include this field of this type. Okay. So you add a custom field to an entity. Whenever you add a custom field to an entity, you have to give a field name so that that new field can be, that is the new field that you're adding. A description to make sure that people understand what that field means, so that people can make use of that metadata that is available as part of the extension. And then finally, field type, right, which refers to a type that we previously talked about, which includes a JSON schema, right, for validating the data. Now, when you extend an entity, all the custom fields that are defined, right, along with standard fields that are available, these are core fields, are core attributes of an entity that is defined as part of Open Metadata Standard. Anything that you have defined as a custom goes into a separate section called extension. And this is where all your extended fields are going to be available. And this will include field name and a value, and that value will be compliant with the JSON schema corresponding to that type. Right. So essentially, we are bringing all the power of JSON schema to even the extended attributes that you're going to be adding through the new type system. So where are we with this? We are a couple of days into the new release. We have all these APIs now committed as part of this issue 4920. You can look at the progress that is being made. We have APIs available for type system. We have APIs available for extending an entity. And then we also have made API changes to set these extended attributes in an entity and then write and read the entity metadata. We are going to be, as this release progresses, add support in the UI for listing all the types, both entity types and field types that is available in Open Metadata, so that you can understand the type system that is underneath Open Metadata. And then you should be able to add new types and extend the entities with custom fields. Finally, these custom fields that you've added to an entity will become available in the UI when you're looking at the entity data, right? So that's the UI support that we are going to add. One of the things that we are still, we are going to take it slowly and cautiously develop is a lot of questions are around, hey, can I add a custom entity? We would like to actually explore with you guys in the community on what entities are you looking at. Right now, the API allows adding new entities, but showing it in the UI, indexing it, categorizing it, connecting it with other entities is a non-trivial amount of work. So we would love to know what kind of entities you would define if, with this new capability. And then we would like to see if those entities are common, of common use, that is useful for the entire community. We will just add them as standard entities instead of defining your own custom entities, because it runs against the standardization and shareable metadata. So, please chime in, comment either on this issue or in Slack channel on what kind of new entities you would like to see in Open Metadata. And, if you suggest new entities, we will add them. The custom extension should be used sparingly, cautiously, because it should, and in cases where it is very proprietary to your environment. In any other cases, we are very happy to add these entities and attributes as a standard part of Open Metadata. So that's sort of what I had. Any questions, comments?
Feel free to just unmute if you have a question and speak it. If there aren't any questions for Suresh right now, then I would just like to say
Either I was super clear or I was super confused.
I would just like to say thank you so much for presenting. I would like to actually end our meeting with giving a few highlights from our community contributors. So I'm just going to, grab that screen share back from you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think you guys should be able to see my screen again. So yes, I wanted to highlight some community contributions. So we have another community merged pull request in the last couple of weeks, this time from Filip. I have added Filip's GitHub here in case you wanted to see his work and follow him. And basically what he did is he was able to fix a Postgres data profiler bug that we have. And I just wanted to say thank you so much from all of us. We love to see community PRs because of course that helps us rocket open metadata into the future even faster, makes it even better. And we love to see community contribution PRs. So thank you very much for that. And I also wanted to take a moment, if I can get my screen to move to the next slide. Come on, you. There we go. I also wanted to take a moment to highlight some of our most active community members from the last couple of weeks. Filip is on here again for his PR contribution, but we also have Siddharth, Raphael, Victor, John, Christian, and Deepankar. Yeah, Deepankar, sorry, it's her, Kerr. So thank you all for your contributions. And I wanted to do another special shout out to Christian and Raphael. They were actually able to help another community member get unblocked by answering a question on our Slack support channel. We love to see that. We love to see our community lift each other up. So thank you guys for your contributions in the last couple of weeks and for everything that you do over time. Did anybody have any questions? I feel like I see some messages coming in through the chat here. Oh, some messages for Suresh. Great presentation, quite clear, both in intention and the way it was communicated. Thanks, guys. Does anybody have any other questions for us while we're here?
I have a question. I'm not entirely sure if this is the right forum to ask it or not. Supposed to be mostly a way where we learn about new things as they get developed and new pull requests and plans and so on. Or does this include a Q&A session, or is there another forum for Q&As?
Well, you can absolutely ask your question here. Feel free to ask your questions anytime, guys, no matter what forum we're in. And we also have the community office hours if it was a different question that you wanted to wait until then, but we're all here now. Please feel free to ask.
Okay. I just so I know. So the community hours are the sort of the regular meeting where technical questions are asked, and not this one.
Sometimes we do get a few technical questions that come up in these forums, but we reserve that time as open time from the community to drop in case you had a question in the support channel that you just like, oh, I'd just rather drop in, talk to somebody, and actually share my screen, work through the problem together.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's the type of
okay.
sort of the. But just so I know, it's really it's my first time here, so just so I know how things work.
No problem. We actually have community office hours today, I think in about an hour after this. So please feel free to join in then if you wanted to.
Yeah. I'll make use of that then.
Okay, sounds great. If there aren't any other questions for today for us, then what we'll do is I'll sign off, give people a little bit of their time back. And Christian, I'll see you potentially in office hours in about an hour and a half or so. And then I'll see the rest of you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you all so much for your time and for joining us today. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much for coming.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.